Okay, so we're thinking again, like I mentioned, we're thinking about the Shema, first and second paragraph. First paragraph was last week. The second paragraph was this week. We want to just begin by pointing out. I'm going to try to keep this not too technical, but I'm try to point out the differences between the two. So we're going to find a few general differences, and then we'll try to think about what they represent. So instead of jumping back and forth between the two paragraphs, I just opened up one page between the two parshas. I just opened up one page on Chabad.org where they have the whole Shema together. So so we don't have to jump back and forth. It's all on the same page, but essentially it's two different parshas. The first paragraph, which is from Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel, all the way to On Your Gates, with the exception of this verse. This verse was inserted later by the rabbis, but that's another story. That is the first paragraph of the Shema. Second paragraph of the Shema is a little bit longer. V'haya'im shamoa, and it will be if you will diligently obey my commandments, which I enjoin you upon you this day, etc. And then that finishes the second paragraph, which is this week's parsha. Third paragraph was in the past in the book of Numbers, where we read about the mitzvah to wear the tzitzit. That reminds us of all the commandments. Okay, fine. So if you want to analyze the first paragraph of the Shema, shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. That's the first statement after the unity that we read about in the first sentence. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, the oneness of God. What does the oneness of God mean to us? How do we react to it? So it awakens love. But if you think about it, I'll give you the pointers because we'll contrast that in a second. If you think about it, if you look at the expressions of love, we have three: with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Three. Okay, so that's the first point. The next point we're going to think about is after love, we hear about learning Torah. These words which I command you today shall be upon your heart. You shall teach them thoroughly to your children. You shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk on the road, when you lie down and when you rise. Okay, so we have study of Torah. Following the study of Torah, we have the performance of the commandments of tefillin and mezuzah, right? You shall bind them as a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as a reminder between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. So to summarize quickly what I said so far, essentially we have three expressions of love. Then we have study. Then we have action. Tefillin and mezuzah are action. Now, there's a subtlety that is very clear in the Hebrew. In the English, it's not clear, so I saved it for the last. And that is that in the first paragraph of the Shema, God is talking to us. God is talking, or Moshe is talking, I should say, really, it's Moshe talking in the singular. You shall love the Lord your God. So in English, you is neutral. It could be singular, it could be plural. In Hebrew, it's very clear that the first paragraph of the Shema, v'ahavta, you shall love. You is in the singular. With all your heart, with all your heart is in the singular. When you're going to go to the second paragraph, everything is going to change. And the first change is it's going to be in the plural. It will be if you will diligently obey my commandments. So all of a sudden we have you is plural. And not just the you is plural, everything here is plural. The entire paragraph is plural. Every word here is plural. Okay, so that's the first thing, singular, plural. Okay, now let's go to some of the other discussions that we were talking about. We'll scroll down a little bit. You shall love the Lord your God. Let's see. It will be if you will diligently obey my commandments, which I enjoin you upon you this day, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart, with all your soul. I count two expressions: with all your heart, with all your soul. We're missing one. What are we missing? With all your might. Okay, so we dropped one. I don't know what the balloons are here for. I don't know. Okay, so we dropped one. That's the first divergence. We already had two, actually. It went from singular to plural, and it went from three expressions of love to two expressions of love. Okay. More interesting, I'll say the most interesting for the biggest divergence for the last, but I'm still being on the technical. A little further down, when we get to the repetition, which is to put on the tefillin on the mezuzah, Therefore, place these words of mine upon your heart and upon your soul, and bind them up for a sign on your hand, and they shall be for a reminder between your eyes, which is tefillin. You should. So we have first tefillin, and then we have Torah study. You shall teach them to your children to speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk on the road, and when you lie down, and when you rise. Okay, so the change happened. The first paragraph of the Shema, we read about 3 expressions of love. We read about the singular. It's in the singular voice. We hear about the commandment to study Torah, then the commandment to do the mitzvah, which is to put on tefillin, which symbolizes all the mitzvot. In the second paragraph of the Shema, it's much more complicated. We move to plural. There's not 3 expressions of love. There are 2 expressions of love. There are not, and then instead of going from Torah study from Torah study from Torah study to commandments, we move from commandments to Torah study. So far, these are the 4 differences. So again, just to catch us up, we're contrasting the first paragraph of the Shema, which we read last week, and the second paragraph of the Shema, which we read this week in this week's Torah portion. And we want to talk about how these seemingly subtle differences, represent a very profound difference between the first paragraph of the Shema and the second paragraph of the Shema, between last week's Parsha and this week's Parsha. And then we want to think about what are the differences and how they and which one is superior, or what's the advantage of each, etc. So that's so far the technical differences, and we're about to introduce the biggest difference between the two. But before that, I'm just going to take a break for about 15 seconds to improve the temperature in this room. So just give me a moment, and we'll apologize for the distraction. Okay, what's the big difference between the first paragraph of the Shema, the second paragraph of the Shema? The biggest difference is that in the second paragraph of the Shema, right in the beginning, you have a very large section. Right after it talks about love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. Yeah, it doesn't say with all your might, but it does say 2 of the 3 expressions that we read about in the first paragraph. Now there's this entire speech about reward and punishment. If you keep the commandments, the rain will come on time and you're going to flourish and you'll be prosperous. If you don't, then the rain will stop and eventually you'll be exiled. So that is a big difference. That's a very big new theme. That's a new theme that we hadn't heard about in the first paragraph, right? So let's just do this briefly. It will be, if you will diligently obey my commandments, which I enjoin upon you this day, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart, with all your soul, okay? And here's the reward. If you listen to the God's commandments, I will give the rain for your land at the proper time, the early rain and the late rain, and you will gather in your grain, your wine, your oil. I will give grass in your field for your cattle, and you will eat and be sated. By the way, you may not know this, but this is the source that the rabbis say that if a person must feed their animals before they eat breakfast, before they eat by themselves, because in the Shema it says, I will give grass in your fields for your cattle, and only after that it says, and you will eat and be sated. So that's the proof that a person is not allowed to eat before they feed their animals. So that's just parenthetically, but it's right here. So this is if you keep the commandments, the rain will come, you'll have grain, wine, oil, everything will be fine. Then he says, take care, lest your heart be lured away, and you turn astray astray and worship alien gods, and bow down to them. For then the Lord's wrath will flare up against you, and he will close the heavens so that there will be no rain, and earth will not yield its produce, and you will swiftly perish from the good land which the Lord gives you. So be careful. And it says, therefore, place these words, visantem, therefore is a translation, and you shall place these words upon your heart, etc. So that's the 2 paragraphs of the Shema we spent 17 minutes analyzing. I think we can ask the big question, which is, when you read this, what do you hear? What do you see? How does this make sense? What's the takeaway? What's the feeling you get between these two paragraphs? The most important question is, why does it need to be repeated to begin with? Then we understand all the themes of the second paragraph appear in the first paragraph. In other words, the mitzvot, reward and punishment appears elsewhere. Okay, fine. So if anybody wants to share their impression from reading these words and analyzing them and seeing the differences, I'll be very happy to hear. Otherwise, we will go straight to the Rebbe's analysis. But so far everything I said is the facts. These are the differences. He pointed out the differences. That's objective. Now the interpretation could be subjective. There could be 70 interpretations. So we have 4 people on the call. We can get at least 4 different perspectives. Or you can volunteer to give multiple perspectives. Then we'll get closer. We'll get closer to the 70. Okay, but so far in other words, the observations. Those are observations. Those are clear. Okay, let's start with Rashi before we get to Kabbalistic and Hasidic. Let's start with Rashi.
For me, whenever I read the second paragraph, it gives me anxiety. It gives me anxiety. The first paragraph I find calming.
Right. So the first paragraph is very calming. I love that. Second paragraph brings anxiety because all of a sudden there's consequences. You better behave. If you don't behave, it's not going to rain. First paragraph is very relaxing. It's very relaxing. I agree with that. It's almost like a rhythm, and you move from awareness to love to study to doing. It's very within the person. Very much within the person. It's like within your own spiritual life. Second paragraph, oh my God, there's a lot of anxiety. I agree. I like that. Okay.
Especially in the morning when I wake up, it's like, and I read the first paragraph and it's like, and then the second paragraph is, wow, I got to be careful today. Yeah. I don't want to lose the food, my food, it's just horrible.
Oh, I love that. Good. Ben, thank you for sharing your perspective because I'm bringing theoretical, you're bringing the real drama of the tension that the second paragraph introduces. Very good. I like that. Thank you. Go ahead, Vicky, please.
I have a question about the context. You said that the first paragraph appears in the previous week's.
Yeah. Yes. So let me give you a little. I'll address the context. Unless you have a specific question, I'll address it before I say it. Yeah.
Yeah, because that probably matters.
Yes, matter. So I'll put it in right here. Before. Yeah, I'll address the contrast right now, and then you'll tell me what you think about this. Last week's parsha and this week's parsha are both very important themes. But if you want to generalize, last week's parsha is the description of the Jewish people in the desert. And in the desert, he talks about the failings of the desert, which is the serving of the golden, not yet. He talks about the stories of the desert and reminds the Jewish people about the revelation of the Torah. That's the big story. We're in the desert. And it keeps mentioning idol worship. Be careful about idol worship. He says that in almost every single chapter, in almost every portion of Deuteronomy, he says that. Because idol worship is the big threat. This week's parsha is very interesting because this week's parsha is all about the blessing in the land of Israel. The mitzvah the grace after meals, to thank God after we eat, the way it appears in the Torah is in the context of the blessing of the land. And therefore it says, you shall eat, you shall be sated, and you shall bless God for the good land that he gave you. And that's why if you look at the benching, if you look at the grace after meals, the second paragraph, he talks about, no delacha, will offer thanks for the lands. And the sages say, if you thank God for the bread, you don't thank God for the land, you didn't fulfill your obligation. Right? So this week's parsha is the context of coming into the land. Now, what is the fear of coming into the land? What is Moshe afraid of about entering the land? Very interesting. When we were in the desert, we were afraid of failure. But we were afraid of the spies, right? The spies were people who were afraid to go into the land of Israel because they were afraid they're going to fail. They're not going to be able to conquer. They're not going to, or from the Hasidic perspective, they're not going to be able to go into the land, be successful in farming, and still maintain their spiritual identity, okay? So they were afraid of failure. In this week's parsha, overwhelmingly, Moshe is afraid of success. You're going to go into the land, he describes this. You're going to go into the land, you're going to prosper. You'll have a lot of gold. You'll have a lot of silver. Everything is going to prosper. And you have a lot of cattle. Everything is going to go great. The threat is, Baram levavecha, your heart becomes haughty. And you become arrogant. And you interpret the success as the product of your own might, and you forget about God. That is this parsha. That, if you want to think of a big theme, and that's what the counterpoint to that is the grace after meals. Now, I just want to say that in Judaism, we have so many blessings. We're Rabbinic Judaism, we have so many blessings. You're supposed to make 100 blessings a day. But in the Torah itself, in the Bible, in the 5 books of Moses, there is only one blessing. There's only the grace after meals. So it's a unique thing, right? In the Torah, there were offerings. Today, we don't have offerings. So the rabbis substituted the offerings with blessings. So today, blessing is just a blessing. But if you're in the Torah, you read the 5 books of Moses, there's only one place you have to thank God after you eat in the land of Israel. Why? Because the land of Israel is dangerous. What's the danger? You're going to prosper. And the danger is to remember after you prosper, after you say it. When you're hungry, it's easy to remember God, right? But when you're satisfied and you have all your needs met and all your accounts are full and the stock market is booming, then to remember God and realize it's not my own might, that is difficult. And that's why you're supposed to thank God. The rabbi said, make the blessing before you eat, but that's not what the Torah says. The Torah says, make the blessing after you eat, not when you're hungry, when you're full. So in other words, the danger in the second paragraph of the Shema is the success. So now in this parsha is the success. Now going back to this parsha is the same problem. We're talking about somebody who is already in the land of Israel, already farming the land. He wants the rain. And God is saying, listen, there's a deal. You want the rain, the Torah has to, you have to keep the Torah. Last week's parsha, we're not in Israel yet. Now, this week's parsha, we're not either in Israel. We're still in the desert, but we're talking about the future existence in the land. Last week's parsha is much more about the stories of the desert. You see what I'm saying? So in other words, going back to Ben's point, in a way to tie these points together, in the first paragraph of the Shema, where is the Jew? The Jew could be anywhere. You could be in the desert. You could be in your basement. You're in your own life. You could be in the study hall. It doesn't describe the scene of a person who's in the field concerned with the obligations of making a living, right? Second paragraph of the Shema. So when you're still at home drinking your morning coffee and meditating about the greatness of God, it's the first paragraph of the Shema. It's very calming. But the second paragraph represents the tension. And Ben is right, there's tension in the second paragraph because the second paragraph represents you. Maybe you're reading about it at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, depending on, but the point is, it's describing you in the mid-afternoon when you're at the workplace, when you're in the field, when you have pressures of the work day or the society around you. And then you have the various pressures, and there you need God to say, listen, you got to be careful lest you succumb to the surrounding environment. So there is a tension because there is a tension. There is a tension because there is a tension. Second paragraph of the Shema is capturing the tension of you, not when you are sitting in your own space, living your inner life. First paragraph of the Shema doesn't tell you anything. It's just you. It's all about within yourself. You could be meditating and saying the Shema. You could be in a silent retreat. You could be anywhere you want. Second paragraph of the Shema places you when you are either literally in the field or concerned. You have to bring home the grain. You have to bring home the oil. You have to bring home the wine. Now there's tension. Now there's tension. Now it's going to be a different scenario. You have to speak to the person in different words, and you have to maybe change I don't want to say the message, but at least, you have to modify what you're saying, even though the goal is the same: love God and be connected to God. But it's describing the person in a different state. Okay, so I'll give Rashi's interpretation, and then we'll jump to the Hasidic interpretation. Rashi's interpretation is actually very beautiful. It's actually very beautiful. Rashi is addressing one point here. First paragraph of the Shema says, love God, study Torah, put on tefillin, and belay the mezuzah. Okay. Second paragraph of the Shema, after we read about the reward and punishment, be careful. Maybe if you don't serve God, if you serve other idols, the rain will stop. And then eventually, you'll be swiftly removed from the land. And then it says, place these words on your hand like tefillin. So what does that mean? Like, why do you have to say tefillin? We already know there's a mitzvah to put on tefillin. So Rashi has a very beautiful interpretation. Rashi says, even after you're exiled. In other words, you would think that we have a relationship with God. When we're in the land, we have to keep the Torah. But if we break the deal, we broke the contract, So we're outside the land. We were exiled. So now we have no obligations to God. We're finished. We have no more relationship. So Rashi says that the second paragraph of the Shema, the points that are repeated, the study of the putting on tefillin, the study of Torah, putting on the mezuzah, is telling you you're not off the hook just because you live in Greenwich, just because we were exiled from Israel 2,000 years, almost 2,000 years ago. So now, according to Rashi, that's why these things are restated. They're restated. The commandments are restated to tell you that the first paragraph is when everything is fine, when you're living in the land of Israel and you feel a connection to God. So therefore, then do the commandments as an expression of that bond. But then, if we stray from God and we're exiled, now, if you ask me, not only me, by the way, if you ask the other nations, if you ask the other religions that try to persuade us to come back to abandon Judaism and join them, what they would tell you is that yes, you were the chosen people, you had you were God chosen people, and you had the covenant, but now you broke the covenant, so you're no longer connected to God. God moved on. God found another people. God moved on from you. You have no relationship with God now, and that's what people told the Jews all the time. And if we are still Jewish today in 2025, it's because we believe that what the Torah tells us. We believe that the relationship is not dependent on whether or not how we act and whether or not we're in the land of Israel. And that's why even after we're exiled, God says, of course you have to put on tefillin. Of course you have to have a mezuzah. Of course you have to have a Torah study. Right? You're not off the hook. The relationship is still intact. So that's Rashi's point, which is interesting. It's historical. It's nice. We go to the Hasidic movement, and the Hasidic movement is really going to try to talk about this within the same person. There's two people inside of you. There's the character who is the first paragraph of the Shema character, and then there's the part of you that's inspired by the second paragraph of the Shema. And therefore, when you talk to yourself and you try to connect yourself to God, you have to say two separate paragraphs because there's two separate parts of you, and each one has an advantage and each one has a disadvantage. So now, going back to Ben, we're not here to create anxiety, but we're here to talk to the part of the person that the first paragraph of the Shema does not inspire. So that's why we have to reframe it and reiterate it in the second paragraph of the Shema. Okay, so what are we going to say? What's the big idea? I'll put the big idea out right now. The big idea is as follows. The first paragraph of the Shema is somebody who is completely in love with God, and he's not concerned with materialism. You don't have to tell him, keep the Torah so the rain will come. He's not in this relationship for the rain, or for the success, or for the wine, or for the grain. He's in the relationship because he's in love with God. He understands that it's the right thing to connect to God, and the greatest thing you could do in your life is to connect to the transcendence, and that's why it starts with the awareness. The hero Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Lord is one means everything else is insignificant compared to his oneness. Everything else is an expression of his oneness. The true existence is God. And that's why, what do you want? Love of God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. All your might. Might is not the perfect translation. Me'od is very. He's like completely devoted, completely in love. So this person is completely inspired only by the connection to God. And that's why, if you want to continue down the variations between the first paragraph and the second paragraph, we first talk about Torah and then mitzvah. Because Torah means understanding. This person understands the relationship. He understands why he wants to connect to God. And therefore, he understands it's logical to him why he's doing the mitzvah. Because the mitzvah is just the action is carrying out the inspiration that he has in his head. So if you want to think about it, it's very motivated by the inspiration that goes from the awareness to the heart to study to action. Okay? So the action, by the way, so my point is the action is the end of the road because the action is motivated. We're not talking about just action per se. We're not saying put on tefillin even though you don't understand what the purpose is. That's what the Chabad people do to you when you're in the street in Manhattan. They say, put on tefillin, light Shabbos, kind of what, when, where, how. It doesn't matter, just do the mitzvah. That's a different story. We'll get to that. That's the second paragraph of the Shema. The first paragraph of the Shema is saying what? It's saying your action is inspired. The action is the last step. It follows the awareness of God. It follows the love of God. It follows the study of Torah. And now when you're doing the action, you're motivated by all this inner spiritual life that you had previously. That's a very high spiritual level. Problem is that there's a part of us, we call it the animal soul, part of us That is that is animalistic. Animalistic means natural. And it's motivated by what? It's motivated by it's self-oriented. It's not transcendent. And if you talk to that part of yourself, transcendence is less interesting. More interesting is what's in it for me? What am I gonna gain from this? How am I gonna be blessed? Now, it's very easy to write that off and say, that's so selfish, that's so self-oriented. Suppress the part of self. But that's not what the Torah says. The Torah says, no. We want to get every part of you involved in the connection to God. So when you want to talk about the parts of you that are self-oriented, you can't say we're going to transcend because it's the greatest thing to do. He doesn't feel so. The animal soul doesn't feel so. So you have to talk to the animal soul in its terms. And you have to say, if you're going to do what God says, if you're going to follow the Torah, you are going to live a better life. You will have a more meaningful life. You'll also be blessed. Right? If you're talking about blessing, the first paragraph of the Shema, the Hasidim have an expression where they say, maybe it's Russian, I don't know. They say feh. Feh means it's not appropriate. The guy is sitting in the first paragraph of the Shema, and you're telling him, serve God, and then you know what's going to happen? You're going to have wine in your storehouse. So that's like offensive. I'm talking about I want to have a spiritual connection to God, and you're dangling some reward in front of my eyes. That's offensive. In the first paragraph of the Shema, for the godly soul, that's offensive, and that's why first paragraph of the Shema we don't mention reward and punishment. What reward and punishment? Maimonides describes the service of God out of love. Love is defined. You do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you're getting anything out of it. You do it for the other person. That's true love. But that's true love. What about the other love? What about love that is beneficial? Nothing wrong with that. If I'm in a relationship, I have to be devoted to you, but I also have to figure out what I'm getting from this. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's the second paragraph of the Shema, talking to the parts of self, talking to the animal soul, that you have to tell them, I'm sorry for the anxiety, Ben, but you have to tell them, listen, there are consequences. You make bad choices. There's going to be unnecessary tension in your life. And this is motivated, the animal soul is motivated by what's in it for me. So you could say, Moshe talking about the animal soul, trying to bribe it, it's not appropriate. Why doesn't Moshe tell us to do the right thing because that's the right thing to do? The answer is he did tell us to do that in the first paragraph of the Shema. But that talks to a certain part of our psyche. What about the part of our psyche that's not motivated by that? It's motivated by what's in it for me. So you can ignore it, you can make believe it doesn't exist, you cannot talk about it, or you can address it directly and say, you know something, keeping the Torah is good for you too. Now, once we see the big difference, now we see the divergent points also. And that is, for example, when it comes to the second paragraph of the Shema, Moshe says, put on tefillin first. Only after the tefillin, he says, study Torah. What does that mean? Do the mitzvah even if you're not motivated. Even if you don't understand why you're doing it. Because the point is, Moshe understands he's talking to somebody who's in the middle of the day, he's in his field, he's not motivated for spirituality. So Moshe says, don't worry if you're motivated, just do the act. That anybody can do. The act anyone could do. Once you do the act, it will also inspire you, and then you'll go study, and then you can increase your inspiration. But you see, the first paragraph of the Shema, the mitzvah is a result of the inspiration. In the second paragraph of the Shema, the mitzvah has no inspiration, but hopefully will lead to inspiration. The point is that there's two separate ways of thinking about which parts of the person are we talking to, and depending on that, what person you're talking to, the language is going to change. There's a beautiful interpretation for the musicians and on the call, and I think I'm excluding myself, but for the musicians over here, I guess you could do about music as well. But King David in the book of Psalms, there are many different introductory phrases to the Psalms. Each Psalm has an introductory phrase, but there are two that are very similar. That's the same two words, just different order. So usually it says Mizmor le David, a psalm or a song to David. Mizmor le David, a psalm for David, a song for David. Sometimes it says to David, a song. What happened? Why are you changing? Is it a song to David, or is it to David, a song? So you could say he's just changing it to make it poetically sound. You don't want to repeat the same things. Then the word, what do they call it? The spell check, the word processor is not going to be happy. The grammar checker is not going to be happy. They want the style. They want you to change. But there's a beautiful medrash that says like this. It's very simple. King David had two types of inspiration. Sometimes he would inspire, and that's why he was inspired, and that's why he sang. And sometimes he sang, and the song made him inspired to say the psalm. Right? What's your starting point? You could do the same act. You're sitting with the violin, you're sitting with the piano, you're sitting with the harp. King David had a harp. You're singing. But what do we know? Is this an expression of the inspiration you feel? Or are you doing it? And right now, when I pick up the instrument, I have no inspiration, but I'm doing it anyway. It's more commitment. And that commitment, hopefully, is going to inspire me to then go study. Study is understand and feel and internalize. So the same thing is happening here. And that's why when we say the two parts of the Shema, you could say it's talking now. Rashi says it's two different eras. It's the era, the first paragraph of the Shema is put on tefillin when you're in Israel. Second paragraph of the Shema is put on tefillin and mezuzah even after the exile. The Hasidic interpretation is saying you yourself, when you're talking to God, when you're praying in the morning, you're saying two different paragraphs because you're talking to two different parts of self. There's the part of self that is inspired and transcendent and fully connected to God only because it's the right thing to do. And therefore, you read the first paragraph of the Shema, there's no discussion of the outside world. There's no threat of exile. There's no material blessing or threat of losing the material blessing. It's not the point. It's my soul connecting to God. And by the way, that's why it's all the singular, because singular represents oneness. In the second paragraph, when we say plural, and everything is plural, it's not just because God is talking to many people. It's because he's talking about the plurality within self. We have so many divergent points. We have so many, we're fragmented people, right? We want all different types of things. Sometimes we want contradictory things. But the first paragraph of the Shema, the person is so devoted to God, he's all oneness. He's singular because every part of himself or every part of the godly soul is connected to the oneness. So you could speak in the singular. In the plural, is you talking to me? Talk to me in the plural because there's a plurality within myself. I can't figure myself out. There's no cohesion within my own personality or within my own psyche. And that's the person we're talking to when we talk about the second paragraph of the Shema. Go ahead, Dr. Tamarin, please.
Rabbi, you talk to us regularly about the animal soul and the spiritual soul. And what you're saying is when we're in touch with the spiritual soul, when we're inspired, we don't need to be threatened. We don't do an act because we want to do the act. In a way, what I'm reminded of is two areas. One is the area of when people are depressed, they don't want to do anything. And therefore, it's more, they need to do things in order to hopefully get themselves undepressed or inspired. We're talking about relationships. When someone is infatuated, they don't have to be encouraged to do the right thing. When they're not infatuated, but they're in a relationship, they need to do the right thing to be inspired. So my question to you is this. As someone who lives his life this way, how often do you find that simply doing the right thing suddenly changes your mood and your perspective, and you become inspired simply by saying a prayer, simply by doing a mitzvah? How much does that actually work with you as an individual?
I don't think I'm unique, and I think it works almost every time, right? I don't think that action is going to solve all the problems, but I think a walk around the block will always make you feel better. There's almost nothing you can do. That's the psyche of the human being. We move, you do an action and it affects their inner workings of the soul. That's just the way that's the way it is. So the short answer is that the challenge is to get yourself to do something when you're not inspired. But when you do it, almost always you feel happy. Very few people come to me or come to you, I think, I would guess, and say, I did something for someone else and I really regret it. I really feel bad that I did that, right? Usually it's the opposite because the difficult part is to get off the couch. The difficult part is to reach out, to pick up the phone, to do something. That's the difficult part. But the fact that the doing something is then going to unleash energy within yourself, that's something that today we know. Judaism always knew it. That's why Judaism is very, very action-based. But today the scientists know that as well. So the short answer is I think almost always when you do something, it's going to make you feel better. Now I want to say something about love because you mentioned relationships. Love is a very tricky word in English and Hebrew, but in Hebrew there are theories that say, I'm not 100% sure convinced, but there are theories that say that the root word of love is give. Hav could be give in Aramaic. V'ahavta, you shall love. And if that is the case, the thesis is we don't give to the people we love. We love the people we give. In other words, if you give to somebody, you're investing part of yourself within that relationship, and that's what triggers the love. That's what creates the bridge that triggers the love. So if I say, I don't feel love for this person, So what should I do? So that's it. No. So then if you don't feel a love to someone that you want to love, what is the answer? Give them. And when you give them, the giving creates the love. Now, giving doesn't have to be giving something tangible. It could be giving them, it could be speaking to them, it could be reaching out to them, but it is expressive yourself to them. So don't wait for the love to express your feeling. Don't wait for the giving to express your feeling, meaning the tefillin to follow the study of Torah and the love of God. That happens in the first paragraph of the Shema. The second paragraph of the Shema says, no, you're in exile. You feel disconnected. You're somebody, you don't feel love to God. If you're motivated by the threat of reward and punishment. Doesn't matter. Just place these words upon your hands, wrap the tefillin, put up the mezuzah, because the action is going to trigger the inspiration. But we don't have to say that in the first paragraph, because the first paragraph you already inspired. So if somebody comes to you and say, I'm in love, what should I do? You don't, or how do I manage this? You don't have to say give more. They're giving, they're expressing, right? Yeah, maybe you have to worry about other problems, respect or whatever. But if someone says, I don't love, the first answer should be, what have you done for that person in the last 3 weeks? And what are you going to do for them in the next week, and see what happens? And the song could be an expression of the music, the playing the music. The music could be an expression of the inspiration, or it could be what induces the inspiration. The same thing is with action. Okay, that's the big idea, and we could stop here, but I'm going to go a step further because we have to be radical. Go ahead, Ben.
Where do you get that there's an obligation to continue to put on tefillin after the exile? In other words,
Rashi gets that from the juxtaposition where it says, "Vavadata mehera," you will be. How do they translate it here? Vavadata, you'll be destroyed swiftly, or you'll be. How do they translate it here? They translate it, "Vavadata mehera."
And you will swiftly perish from the great land.
Perish from the land, good land which the Lord gives you. And then here's therefore, but this place these words. So now the question is, what is place these words, which is of mind upon your heart, which is tefillin? Why is it placed right here? We already know it in the first paragraph of the Shema. So Rashi says the juxtaposition, which means you'll be swiftly perished from the land, and nevertheless put on tefillin. That's how he learns it. It's not the simple interpretation, but that's Rashi's interpretation. The juxtaposition. Remember, the question is, again, the premise really is that nothing in the Torah is redundant. We know this already. We know the commandment to put on tefillin. We know it in the first paragraph. Why are you repeating it? That's question number one. Question number two, why are you repeating it specifically in this paragraph? You should have put it together up here in the front, where we talk about love the Lord your God, serve him with all your heart, with all your soul. Just like the first paragraph of the Shema, right here, you should put on the tefillin, and then say, if you stray, you'll be exiled. If you follow the commandments, the rain will come, and if you stray, you'll be exiled. Why wait with the commandment to put on, with the reiteration of the commandment to put on tefillin? Why wait until we mention exile? So Rashi says, why? Because that's the point. Even if you're exiled, don't forget, you're still in the game, you're still in the business. God still wants a relationship. God still has requests and demands. And if he has demands of us, we have demands of him. That's the way it works. It's a two-way street.
I mean, I like the idea. I think the interpretation is a stretch, but the idea is very nice.
Yeah, the idea is nice. And again, interpretation, this is not the place where we get this from. We get this from all over the sages, all over the prophets, and Moshe says this. But once you have the idea, you could say, and you come with the premise that there's no redundancy, and the juxtaposition where verse is placed is precise. Then it's then it's sweet. In other words, then it's nice. If the concept is true, and then if this has to convince you of the concept, it's a little bit shaky. But if the concept is true, you know it from elsewhere, then you see the way it's placed here. I think it's elegant. But this is taste. You can't argue about what is beautiful and what is elegant.
I agree. That's very nice.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so now we have a nice thing. We can all go home, and we could say we have the Shema, because we have the first paragraph of the Shema, the inspired Jew, inspired by the love of God. He has no other interests, and is very focused, and he's sitting in his house, in his basement, not concerned with the world, not concerned with his bank statement, not concerned with the bills, thinking about the love of God, how that trickles down to his heart, and then to a study of Torah, and then to his action. Beautiful, everything is fine. Second paragraph of the Shema, the Jew is far less inspired. He's out in the field. Forget about where he is technically. What is he thinking about? He's thinking about, I need my grain, I need my wine, I need my oil. Those are my values. That is my motivation. I'll do anything if I'll serve God if God says that the rain will come. But then if you're not really serving God, you're serving the rain, right? You want the grain. That's what you want. So we're talking about a completely different value set, or within the same person, the animal soul who is motivated by completely different values, and also the place where I am. I'm out in the field in a way, or in exile. And nevertheless, I'm putting on tefillin. Now, my tefillin are not so inspired, but who cares? Hopefully that will lead to inspiration. Now, if I paint these two pictures, and I say, which one is superior? So there is a tendency, most spiritual seekers would say there's no question the first paragraph is more inspiring, right? There's no tension, there's wholesomeness, there's singularity. Everything's beautiful. You don't have to start threatening people with reward and punishment. It's just wholesome love. Second paragraph, that's not the place. That's a much lower spiritual state. So the Hasidic interpretation, and especially the Rebbe talked about this, he says in 1 second, in a way, the second paragraph is far superior. Why? Because going back to the theme that we always talk about, what is the purpose of Judaism? If the purpose of Judaism is to remain within your own domain and to teach you how to connect to God, how to come closer to God, then indeed the first paragraph is superior. But if the purpose of Judaism is to go out to the world and address the person the way he is within this physical world, and when he values what the world values, and then impact the world in its own terms, then the second paragraph of the Shema is the ground zero, is the playing field where that happens. So first paragraph of the Shema, you're much more similar to your soul in heaven. That's the part of you that's not challenged. But that's not why the world was created. The world was created because God wants us to transform the physical world, the material world, and its values. So to really do the purpose of the Shema. If you want to get poetic here for a second, we'll stop back. We'll step back for a second. What is the Shema? What is the tefillin? What is the mezuzah? Both the tefillin and the mezuzah, you're taking the idea of the oneness of God, and you're writing it on a parchment, a physical object, and the physical object becomes holy. That's why you kiss it. That's why it's holy. It's not allowed to fall to the floor. So in other words, what is it? What do you need tefillin? Why do you need mezuzah? Just say the Lord, say Shema, say Hashem Echad, God is one. Why do you have to write it down? I have to write it down. You're going to forget it. You're not going to forget it. You say it twice a day for 50 years. You're not going to forget the Shema. I have to write it down. So the Hasidic interpretation is the whole purpose of the creation is that the unity of God touches and affects the material world. So you have to write it. You have to transform the physical. Now, if that's why that's the importance of the tefillin and the mezuzah, not just to have the abstract concept of the oneness of God, but to let that abstract concept come crashing and hit and affect and interact with the physical world, then the arena where that plays out is the second paragraph of the Shema. And if you could be in the second paragraph of the Shema, and you could be a person who right now, the part of you that's dominant is the part of you that's very concerned about the material world, and yet you find it within yourself to create some measure of inspiration and some measure of love to God, that is the goal, that is the purpose. So in a way, it's counterintuitive. The less spiritual, the less enlightened is the goal, is the purpose. And that's why it's the second paragraph of the Shema. Not because we're descending, we're starting at the heights and then crashing down. No, in a way, we're advancing. But the advancement means less inspiration, but that's okay because the goal of life is not inspiration. The goal of inspiration is to affect the world. The goal of inspiration, the goal of prayer in your own home with connecting to your godly soul is that when you are in the physical world, interacting with the other people and with the economy and with the values of the world, that you should be able to bring some level of the oneness of God into that arena. And therefore, less inspiration does not spell a lesser level. To the contrary, that means that's the ground. That is the place. We want the Jew to be in the place where he values materialism, and in that space, find a way to love God. Maybe not with all your might. Maybe you love God and you also love the rain. Okay, but even there, when you're in that state and you find it within yourself to have a relationship with God, that is the purpose of creation. That's the goal. That's the ultimate. That's the transformation that God is seeking, because that's the purpose of creation. not just to remain spiritual, but to transform the physical to the spiritual. So that is the pitch. Big idea. First paragraph of the Shema is much more spiritual. Second paragraph of the Shema is much more relating to the person who actually is less spiritual and very connected to the materialism and the values of the world. So it's a lesser degree of connection to God. But the Hasidic interpretation says that doesn't mean we're on a lower state. It means we're advancing. It means we're on the front lines. It means we're at the ground zero where the purpose of creation plays out, which is the transformation. You can't transform the world if the world is not meaningful to you. You can't transform the world from your basement. You have to be in the field. You have to be involved in amassing wealth. And there say, you know something, I want my relationship with God. So that is the pitch. That's the big idea. Thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful day, wonderful Shabbat. And we're on the front line, so we got to do this. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Thank you. That was a great class.
it's always a great class.
Yeah, thank you. You're right. You're right, doctor. Thank you. Yeah.
Rabbi, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
I hear you correctly. It is probably more central to Judaism to do the right thing when we don't want to do it
That's
than
right.
we do want to do it.
Right.
That is, in a way, to use Vicky's terms, it's more spiritual to practice the piano when you don't feel like doing it than when you feel inspired.
So we have to be careful here. I wouldn't say it's more spiritual, but I would say it's more meaningful,
More meaningful.
more consistent with the divine will, and more consistent with the purpose of creation, and more. If I open up the thesaurus, I'll probably find another few descriptions.
So, but
spirituality is overrated. That's the point here.
You're right. So what you're saying is you're focusing on meaningfulness rather than spirituality. And saying what is meaningful is transformation.
Correct.
That it is the act itself of transforming it. When you've become spiritual, fine, then stay spiritual and keep it, and remember to not let the animal overcome it.
But I will say that even within every person, even within a spiritual person, there's the part of self that is more transcendent, and there's the part of self that is self-oriented.
Right.
When you have that part of self, you have to speak to it as well. And when you speak to it, don't just think, oh, I have to compromise and lower my standards and say, serve God because it's a nice thing, not because it's the right thing to do. So in a way, I feel like I'm descending from my spiritual heights. But what we're saying is that's why your soul came down to the world. Not that your godly soul could feel oneness of God. So you could negotiate with the self-oriented part of self and talk to it and negotiate with it and transform it slowly but surely. That is where the drama is at. That's where the interesting things happen. So I'm talking about two different people, but even within the same person, there's the part of self that is transcendent, that maybe is not inspired by assets and money, just wants to do something for the transcendent value. There are parts of self like that, and celebrate that. But when you move to the other parts of your personality, don't just think you're descending, because you may be descending in the ladder of spirituality, but that's not the only ladder. The ladder of purpose of creation, purpose, meaning, and also in a way, with purpose and meaning comes also even value. What you value, what's enjoyable is really what's meaningful, is what's difficult, the challenge, right? So in so many areas, what you may feel is a step down is really aligning yourself with the purpose, and in that sense, it's more meaningful and in a way inspiring, I guess. Yeah.
Rabbi, let me put this in very familial terms, if I may. What you're saying is this: if you have a child that naturally is very good, very spiritual, as it were, wants to do the right thing, it's not such a big deal. If you've got a child who's rebellious and difficult and self-oriented, the most meaningful thing is if you can change that child.
Yeah.
So that your most difficult child becomes your spiritual challenge.
100%. 100%.
And Vicky's most difficult student to studying the piano is her greatest challenge, not the child who can't wait to get up and start practicing.
It's not just the challenge. That's why it's possible. That's why your soul descended. Right? That's why you came down. Because think about, the place of tension is the place of growth. We like to think we want serenity. Serenity is good for a weekend. On Shabbat is pleasure and serenity. But during the week, we need tension, because tension is where the growth happens. So the place of tension is not the place of the lack of spiritual. We could look at it. Oh, I wish I was in the first paragraph of the Shema. Why am I in the second paragraph of the Shema? No, that's where I need to be. That's where it matters.
And that's where we all are, because we cannot just live in some dream worlds. We
Right.
This world where we have like a lot of students who are more challenging. We have circumstances that are challenging. That's the way of life. So that's why the second paragraph is so.
Indeed, indeed. It reminds me of what my grandmother, who was a social worker, she would always say, the child who's hardest to love, the child who is hardest to love is the one who needs it most.
Why is it the second paragraph though? Why?
That's a good question. That's a good question. The answer is that before you go out to the world, you have to fortify the spiritual side of self, because otherwise you're going to be swallowed up. So you start your day by creating and try to start your day in a spiritually comfortable environment where you meditate and you focus before you run out to the pressures of the world, which really bring out within yourself the parts of self that want to succeed in that arena. Right? But to be able to do that, you first have to have an anchor. And the anchor is the spiritual sense. So we always have this idea that you start your day by prayer, by study, and then you go out to the world. And it's always like that. When you're a child, you spend more time studying, and then you go out to the world. The Jewish people first had to be in the desert studying Torah, then they can go into the land of Israel. You need a spiritual anchor. You need a spiritual anchor, a spiritual foundation. And then you could take a deep dive into the raging waters. So you want to touch the part of self that is transcendent, and then you can go into the world and try to transform it. If you're not touching that part of self, then it's more likely that I'll be affected by the world than be able to transform it.
That makes sense.
Okay, wonderful Shabbos, everybody. Wonderful day.
Rabbi, we're meeting on Sunday.
Sunday, yes. God willing, Sunday. Next Tuesday, I'm not sure about, but Sunday, yes. And next Friday, yes.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.